44% of Brazilians are on WhatsApp. That's where they're getting their political news these days. What did you find when you looked at the messaging that's actually going back and forth? How much is real and how much is frankly what we call fake news?
Well, what we see, it is a big amount of misinformation going back and forth on the WhatsApp system. We have analyzed about 50 images, for example, and out of those 50 images that we got actually to analyze, we only found that 4 of them were totally true. That is like very little amount of good information being around in the WhatsApp in Brazil. That's a very low amount of good information.
4 out of 50. 4 out of 50. That is very low. When it comes to where we've been concerned about disinformation, a lot of focus has been put on Facebook and Twitter, but it seems like these kind of more private conversation is where it's at. Chris, how concerning is this that these are kind of happening a little bit more out of the public eye, perhaps in group text, but not on a public message board like Facebook or Twitter?
Right. What we have noticed here in Brazil, we have just finished the election, is that we have spent about 2 years analyzing and trying to figure out how to fight misinformation on Facebook, on Twitter, and Google, like the social media that we usually read and reach, right, every day. And now we have this whole new world being opened up. That is that how do we fight misinformation on encrypted platforms such as WhatsApp and Telegram? That is something that we in Brazil didn't figure out very much, and somebody else in some other part of the world might need to figure out.
And David, put this in context for us in terms of this election. I mean, Bolsanaro was not necessarily right in front of the public eye before this candidate cycle. How much did this kind of groundswell of social media actually kind of change his ascent to power?
Well, it's tough to know for sure, right? Because WhatsApp, and I know it's not so popular in the U.S., but it's encrypted from end to end, and so you don't really know what the impact is. He is someone who built a very big social media following, both on Facebook and on Twitter, and then a lot of this stuff, goes through WhatsApp, but you really don't know how much. And certainly there was much more concern about the use of WhatsApp and how it influenced the election in the first round. You could probably speak, or Chris could probably speak better to that, but it seems as though it kind of came down a bit in the second round after the courts began reacting to this. There was a big bombshell report saying that a company or companies were financing mass WhatsApp messaging to people, to the Brazilian electorate. And that really had a big impact on the first round, but we don't know how much. We won't know how much, it doesn't seem.
What we do know is that tough talking does make for viral content, David. In terms of what he is kind of pushing out there in terms of the messaging, how much is it tough talk, and how much is there actually policy behind some of the ideas around security, gun laws, and privatization that he's been really pushing?
Well, I would say that that's an issue not just regarding Bolsonaro, but a lot of the candidates in this race entirely. It wasn't about policy proposals. This wasn't a race where everyone was out there saying, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and he was the only one, with bluster. It was a lot of that on all sides. I think that he's made clear where he stands in terms of traditional family values and liberalizing gun ownership, policies like that. Others say he's always been fixated on the idea of leveraging Brazil's economic growth by mining in the Amazon. That's something that you really didn't see much of during this campaign, but is nevertheless one of his big policy focuses, as well as privatizations you guys mentioned a bit earlier. Mm-hmm. That's something that we didn't see as much in the race, but is a cornerstone of the economic model they're going forward with.
Chris, I think it also does come down to a question of how do you define fake news? I mean, we're looking at Gab, the platform that's pushing a lot of kind of far right information. It has been present here and down in Brazil. A lot of the followers of the new chief down there are on Gab as well. How do you kind of parse through what's real and what's not in the context of news around an election as important as this one?
So there are many platforms right now popping up with dirty information, and what we do is that we actually have a methodology that is part of the IFCN, is the International Fact-Checking Network, and it is being spread all over the world right now. And what we did, for example, this weekend on Saturday and Sunday, we had an initiative, collaboration between all the platforms that are doing fact-checking here in Brazil. And just to give you an idea, we actually worked for 24 to 48 hours long, and we debunked about 50 articles that were fake, false information. That's a lot. That gives us a ratio of 1 lie per hour in the last weekend of election in Brazil. That is a lot.